Hurry up and make these trades before week 9. We have at least 8 players we are talking about today, so stick around all the way to the end because we're going to give you 2 rookie trade targets that we believe you can buy low just for this week only. I am joined by Dave Kluge, host of the Launchpad for Footballguys, and well, he's our resident Bears fan, so it'd be weird to not start off with this. Chase Claypool traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Chicago Bears. Dave, how does this affect fantasy and how does it affect your heart?
I'm not nearly as excited as the average Bears fan is. I mean, it's cool that we got a big possession receiver that can go downfield and make these acrobatic catches, and he's going to stretch the defense a little bit. But giving up a second-round pick for a guy that has a year and a half left on his rookie deal, personally, I'd rather just wait it until next season, draft a second-round player, and get 4 years of contract control. But the one silver lining here is that there was so much talk this offseason about how the front office didn't have any faith in Justin Fields, that they weren't setting him up for success, that they didn't want to get him any help, blah, 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 blah. We all heard it. But I think that this shows that Justin Fields has shown enough this season that the front office does have a little bit of faith in him. They went out and got him a guy who should step in as the team's wide receiver one so we can get a fair evaluation of what Justin Fields can do. So that's the silver lining there. But if I'm being totally honest, Chase Claypool is probably still what he was in Pittsburgh, wide receiver 3 for fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know that it changes much for Chase Claypool, but I do just love what this does for Justin Fields. At very worst, it creates another diversion to stretch that field out and possibly allow Justin Fields to do a little bit more. But before we go any further, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and smash that like and subscribe button, please, and drop your week 9 questions in the comments below, okay? I'm going to get back to each and every one of those. Also, for those of you not watching on YouTube, we have our audio version of the show. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, footballguys.com. The links are all going to be in the description for my YouTube viewers. And let's take a moment, leave a 5-star review for us on those audio versions, and check out all the great content that Footballguys has to offer. Let's get into our trade targets. We're going to be talking about running backs first, Dave. And man, my first guy, DeAndre Swift. Okay, running back for the Detroit Lions. And I got to watch him go up against my Miami Dolphins this week. And I think a lot of people were really disappointed with the output from this week, but touchdown kind of saved him. TJ Hawkinson was just traded away from this team. The targets should continue to go up for DeAndre Swift. And we still have no Jameson Williams. We don't know when he's going to be ready. It could still be another month, Dan Campbell says. Josh Reynolds really hasn't been all that fantasy relevant. And Amon-Ra St. Brown can't be the only guy catching passes in this offense. So I think that a lot of what happened last week was Swift is being eased back into the game. It was just a 55% snap share. I think we're going to start to see that grow a little bit more as he gets healthier. And this is a team that if I'm looking at a running back that can be involved in the passing game, that negative game script for Detroit is just so perfect for him. They have such a bad defense there. And once again, talked about this a couple episodes ago. DeAndre Swift, he averages 6 targets per game and over 4.5 receptions per game with Jared Goff at quarterback. So you always have that floor. He's got that talent for the explosive ability. He's got the 9th easiest strength of schedule remaining for running backs in fantasy football. His next 3 games, Green Bay, Chicago, New York Giants. He could absolutely blow up in those 3 games. And this is the big one. His bye week has already passed. So if you trade for him and you trade away players that have their bye week coming up, let's say even a Jonathan Taylor who's currently hurt and has a bye week coming up, you now get to skip a bye week in fantasy. It's so huge to have a star player on the field every single week. Not to mention Carolina and Chicago in the final 2 weeks of the fantasy season. Those are 2 juicy matchups for fantasy running backs. This is the kind of player, I know it's scary because of the injury and coming back, and it's not a great offense, but this is the kind of player you go after to win your league. Gives you a high floor and explosive plays. Dave, let's go with your running back trade target.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen a lot of backfields flip already this offseason, which isn't something historically that we see happen too much, but Tony Pollard has taken control of the Dallas backfield. We already saw Travis Etienne played so well that the team decided to ship off James Robinson. Cam Akers has lost his role, and Najee Harris is losing touches to, Jaylen Warren. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but we are seeing all of these backfields just starting to flip where coaches are saying that they are okay going with the better talent. And right now, there is a clear better talent in Chicago. Khalil Herbert is outperforming David Montgomery in just about every single metric. I was looking at the numbers this morning, actually, and there are 2 categories that David Montgomery leads Khalil Herbert in: touches and snaps. That's it.
Wow.
You look at yards per attempt, rushing yards over expectation, yards per touch, scrimmage yards, touchdowns, fantasy points per game. Khalil Herbert is leading David Montgomery in all of these categories. I love rushing yards over expectation per attempt. What that is a metric that really measures a running back's efficiency, and what you see atop that list are some of the best pure runners in the league. Right now, Khalil Herbert is third in rushing yards over expectation per attempt, behind only Travis Etienne and Tony Pollard, two guys that we see taking hold of their backfields. So what I see with Herbert is a very talented young player who is outplaying David Montgomery on the final year of his deal. We just saw Chicago really shake things up so they can kind of get a fair evaluation of Justin Fields and what this defense looks like without Roquan Smith. And I think that the writing is on the wall for them to also see what they have in Khalil Herbert so they can help make their assessment on what to do with David Montgomery going forward. Khalil Herbert has been outplaying David Montgomery for half the season so far. He's getting more touches when he is on the field than David Montgomery is. And I am actually ranking Montgomery ahead or behind Herbert this week. And I think going forward for the rest of the season, Herbert is a guy who can have some standalone value even without an injury to David Montgomery.
You are preaching to the choir, man. I am all aboard the Khalil Herbert train. I have been the offseason, have been since last season as a rookie. I've got him stashed everywhere. People have been trying to offer me picks and dynasty and all kinds of stuff, and I will not move off of him. I love Khalil Herbert going through to the rest of the season. Let's take a look at some of our wide receiver trade targets here. And I'm going to start us off with Devonte Adams. Okay. Another big name that moves the needle in fantasy football. This is what you want to do. You want to go after players that move the needle this time of year. Okay. This cannot be kind of middling players. It's going to be a wide receiver 3, like you mentioned with Chase Claypool. Like that's not necessarily the guy you want to go after in fantasy, but the whole Raiders offense at this moment has a big discount after how bad last week's game was. Devonte Adams saw a career low for him as a healthy starter in the NFL. 1 reception, 3 yards on 5 targets. I know he was actually sick throughout the week. Okay. I know he had a little bit of an illness leading up to the game, and that may have affected the way he played. But man, we saw this Las Vegas Raiders offense runs through him. If he has an off day, the whole offense is having an off day. And the Raiders, luckily for Devonte Adams, have the 3rd easiest strength of schedule remaining for fantasy wide receivers. So it's already, it's pretty obvious, right? Devonte Adams is one of the best wide receivers in all of fantasy football. Now he's got an easy strength of schedule. You have a very small window here to buy low on someone that may just be panicking at this midpoint here in the season. Prior to this week, Davante was the wide receiver 6 overall in PPR. And despite this 1-point output, he is still the wide receiver 9 overall in PPR. There's not many players that are that good that could just totally goose egg a week and still be top 10 at their position. He's currently 6th in target share in the NFL at 30% target share on the Las Vegas Raiders. It is absolutely mind-blowing. This is a guy that, if things start to right and get corrected there in Las Vegas, he is definitely a top tier wide receiver to go and grab. You could probably get him for relatively cheap considering how panicked another fantasy manager might be. Dave, let's get to your wide receiver trade target here. And it's a name that might scare a few people.
Yeah, if you think that you can go out and get Devonte Adams for relatively cheap, I don't know what you'd consider cheap to be for this player. You can probably go throw out Caleb Huntley or Ronnie Rivers right now and get yourself some Allen Robinson. Now, this isn't a ringing endorsement to go out and sell the farm for Allen Robinson and plug him in as your wide receiver 1, but there's some teams right now that are sitting below 500 that need to shake things up, and there are some signs of life right now in Allen Robinson's usage that he could possibly regress and be a little bit more dominant going forward. Now, it's also equally as possible that a 29-year-old Allen Robinson is just on the downslope of his career, and this is what it is. But like I said, you can go out and get him right now for next to nothing. The person that rosters Allen Robinson in your league is probably thinking about dropping him. So take your wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, running back 5, whatever it is on your team, and throw an offer out there. What really jumps out to me with Allen Robinson is that he is averaging 1.7 red zone targets per game. Now, 1.7 red zone targets per game doesn't sound like a ton until you look at the other people that are up there. The only people with more red zone targets per game than Allen Robinson: Travis Kelce, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Zach Ertz, Devonte Adams. That's the end of the list. This team went out and paid almost $45 million to bring Allen Robinson in this year, and they are desperate to get him involved in the offense. Nobody has been able to step up in the passing game besides Cooper Kupp. We're seeing some shades from Tyler Higbee, but I don't think that he is the long-term answer. This team seems hellbent on getting the ball to Allen Robinson in and near the end zone. So we already saw a touchdown a couple of weeks ago, which, kind of saved his fantasy outing. But since that week 1 dud, he's been averaging 5.7 targets per game. Nothing great, but we see that connection with Matthew Stafford just getting a little bit stronger every single week. But the most important thing here, like I said when I started, is that you can get him for close to nothing. So if you're sitting below 500 right now, looking to shake some things up, Allen Robinson still has that same desirable ceiling that he had in the offseason, except now instead of spending a third or a fourth round pick in your fantasy draft, you can get him for next to nothing, stash him on your bench, and see what happens going forward.
I think the great thing about a trade target like Allen Robinson is that there really is no risk. Like you're not having to give a whole lot up to go and get a player like that. So it's not like you run this big risk by getting him onto your roster. He can't get much worse than this. And if there is a team that could potentially turn things around and get it going, it is Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams. And we saw Cooper Kupp got hurt this week. And I'm not totally, excited about Allen Robinson, like you mentioned, but the fact of the matter is he costs nothing. And in a lot of my leagues, he's on the waiver wire. You don't even have to trade for him. So this kind of works as as a double subject here for Allen Robinson. So I'm going to shift to another Allen. Allen Lazard is my other wide receiver trade target to look after. And Dave, I know that I'm tugging at your heartstrings because you absolutely love Allen Lazard. And listen, this was the big factor here. The Packers did not make a move for a wide receiver at the trade deadline. And this was one of those things where the GM, Brian Gutekunst, must have felt like they're good. Like they didn't want to go and make that move. And this is with Allen Lazard actually coming off of a shoulder injury. He may miss another week or two. This just, man, it just leaves the door so wide open for Allen Lazard to continue to be that wide receiver 1 in that offense. Dave, I know you absolutely loved him going into the season, and for good reason. When he's been active, weeks 2 through 7, he was the wide receiver 17 overall in PPR. Okay. He has been very, very productive in his last 5 games where he was playing. He was averaging over 7.5 targets. Okay. Nearly 8 targets per game. That is top 12 wide receiver type stuff. And here's a really fun stat. Okay. I don't know how it really plays into the trading thing, but fun stat: 21 of Lazard's 27 receptions have either been for a first down or a touchdown. That is the highest percentage in the NFL. It just shows you Aaron Rodgers is going to him in times of need. That is the guy that he is comfortable with. And, we've talked about that with wide receivers. When a quarterback is comfortable with him, that means he's going to keep looking his way. Lazard has proven to be very, very productive in PPR. I think the shoulder injury gives him a nice discount at the moment. And listen, he's likely back in week 10, maybe week 11 at the latest. Doesn't seem like it's too serious. I've talked with Dr. Vig about it. We talked about Allen Lazard a couple weeks ago. I think that what Lazard does is he gives you that high floor and high ceiling. And that's typically what you're looking for in the trade targets now. A guy that doesn't present a whole lot of risk, doesn't have a really big price on his head when you have to go and trade for him. And top 17 production, I'm going to go and pay for that all day. And you're probably going to only have to pay a wide receiver 3 type cost for a guy who has potential to be a wide receiver 1. I absolutely love him as a trade target going late into the season. Now, we told you guys, stick around for some rookie trade targets that we thought that you could buy low. And Dave, this one is interesting because this has been such a popular player, and it's weird to think that we can buy him low, but we actually can.
Well, I think the reason you can get Greg Dulcich low right now is because he has a bye week next week. And a lot of people don't want to hold on to tight ends through their bye week. But if you got deep benches or if you've got somebody that you're confident plugging in this week, absolutely go out and stash Greg Dulcich. Now, I really struggled through that one. Dulcich. There, I got it.
Dulce de leche.
And another one thing, when you look at his fantasy output, 12.1 fantasy points per game doesn't sound like a lot, but for tight ends, that's pretty good. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz, TJ Hawkinson, those are the only guys averaging more points per game at the tight end position right now than Greg Dulcich. And he's only played 3 games. I mean, we see this all the time where NFL, tight ends come into the NFL and it takes them a while to get acclimated and fully up to speed. But Dulcich showed it in his first game. His speed and athleticism popped off the screen. He scored a touchdown in his NFL debut. He came up just short of another touchdown last week. And really, that's what's kind of crazy is he's putting up points and he's only had 1 touchdown so far in 3 games. But his yards per game are what really, really shocked me. Again, 60.7 yards per game. Doesn't sound like a lot, but we know how difficult it is to put up points at the tight end position. The only tight ends averaging more than 60.7 yards per game are Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. I mean, It's crazy to think about that what this guy has done in his first 3 games. So I don't know if he's going to be able to maintain this pace for the entire season, but all of a sudden, this Broncos offense looks somewhat sparked up with Greg Dulcich in there because he can run the underneath routes. He can get open deep. He can rack up yards after the catch. He does everything that we thought Albert Okwuegbunam was going to be able to do for this offense, just does it better. And right now, you can maybe get him on your waiver wire. You can probably trade for him for close to nothing. With that bye week, I think that there is an opportunity to get him for cheap right now. And he's a guy that you should be looking at as a top 10 tight end going forward with even more upside than that. I absolutely love Greg Dulcich.
Now, Dave, you may have felt like you struggled with Greg Dulcich's name when you started, but you absolutely nailed Albert Okwuegbunam. That was elite level pronunciation, sir.
I plugged that in just to make myself feel better for stumbling over Dulcich's name.
Smart man, chess, not checkers. All right, let's get to our last trade target here, and it's a rookie that I think this is the very last window where you can buy him low. Okay, I think I've talked about this player every single week for the last 4 weeks, and it's George Pickens, wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And it's kind of a weird buy low, buy high time. Okay. It all depends on the fantasy manager that you're talking to, right? I know that Chase Claypool has been traded away from this team, but the buy low time is because 1, Steelers are going into a bye week. Okay. 2, George Pickens just had his worst game of the season as a legit starter for this team this past week. 0 receptions on 3 targets. It was his first real dud game with Kenny Pickett. And listen, rookies tend to get a really big bump in production coming out of that bye week. And we've seen that. It gives the coaches another week of install. It allows the rookies to be put more into the game plan and really allow them an extra week to prepare for their next opponent. And it gives these coaches an idea of what they're going to have going forward. So I think that we could see an absolute explosion from George Pickens here now that Chase Claypool's been traded. Okay, he was getting 7.5 targets per game over the last 4 games, Claypool was. Okay, so with that, I know target vacancy always doesn't mean, more production for the other players, but you got to think Pickens is going to get at least one of those, like maybe 1, maybe 2, right? So you're talking about an explosive big play threat getting potentially 8 to 9 targets a game. Dave, I'm so sorry, but I have to say this, right? Bears GM Ryan Poles could have drafted George Pickens with either of the team's second-round picks in 2022. Instead, he trades his 2023 second-round pick for the wide receiver that gets replaced by George Pickens. I'm sorry. I had to just, get the dagger in there a little bit deeper. I'm so sorry, man. But
yeah.
It's not great, man. It's not great. I can feel your pain through the audio here. Listen, prior to week 8, okay, George Pickens was averaging 5 receptions on 7 targets per game. We know that can go up. Weeks 5 through 8, talked about this last week. He was the wide receiver 18 in PPR. So this is a player who he can give you wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 production, and you're going to be getting charged a wide receiver 3 price in a trade. Okay. It's all about the optics, coming off a bad game, having a bye week, coming off an injury. These are players with talent and high upside. Not to mention, one of the things that I love when looking at trade targets is George Pickens has the second easiest strength of schedule for a fantasy wide receiver, according to Pro Football Focus. So I really love the opportunity for him to explode here in the rest of the year. I want to let you guys know you could drop all of your week 9 questions here in the YouTube comments below, and I will get back to every single one of them. If you're listening on the podcast audio form, drop any kind of questions you want about your fantasy team, about trades in a review. Leave a 5-star review, ask your question, and I'm going to get back to you, okay? I will answer it in the next podcast, or you can drop your Twitter handle on there, and I will be sure to DM you, okay? I want to make sure that each of our audience members gets some personalized advice from us. That's it for us. Dave, thank you so much for joining. We're going to talk to all of you guys next Monday for our Week 10 waiver wire episode. Adios.